Welcome back, Standouts. You're here with Kelly and Denali Tshibaka, where we just finished interviewing Nick Begich, our Republican candidate for the House. You know, one thing that I think is really interesting that is so controversial this election is the abortion question. And as someone who just graduated from college, of course, that's one of the dominant topics on campus. But what I think is really fascinating is just how the pro-choice movement has spun all of their arguments to get the younger generation in support of it. But I'm noticing a lot more people my age are falling for it less and less.
What are you seeing?
Well, one thing that I've noticed is that they've started talking about abortion as if it's some kind of plan C almost.
Like a contraceptive?
Yeah. Like if your plan B pill doesn't work or your condom doesn't work or you just refuse abstinence, well, here's abortion. You can just terminate your pregnancy like this. And one thing I've noticed is a lot of the women my age are saying that's not how that works. They're not looking at abortion as a contraceptive. They're looking at it as usually like a Hail Mary, but also often a path that shouldn't actually be pursued at all.
That's interesting. That seems like a real change in how your generation is seeing it. And abortion and birth control and contraceptives are not the same thing. They're very different. And I think it's really important that your generation is understanding that. How do you feel about birth control?
I'm for birth control. I think there's any number of reasons why a person might take it. And I know you are too, despite those rumors that were coming out during your election. But yeah, I think that contraceptives in and of themselves are totally fine, but abortion is not a contraceptive.
Yeah, it's a very different choice. The other thing that we started to chat about in our family is the idea of choice. And that choice is, it's the slogan phrase. People will kind of plant their camps around basically one word.
Yeah.
This whole debate comes down to one word. But I remember when I worked in a crisis pregnancy center and had these conversations with vulnerable women in crisis pregnancies behind closed doors, most of them were not in a situation where they didn't have a choice in getting pregnant. They'd had a choice, but they did not feel like they had a choice about having a baby. Most of them felt like they did not have the support. They wanted to have a child. That's why they were at the center, but they did not have the support they needed to follow through on having a child. So they either didn't have the relationship support or financial support or support within their family. And so it almost felt to them like they actually didn't have a choice. And we have to be really honest about the fact that there is a huge billion-dollar industry that pushes and encourages women towards abortion because it makes money.
Yeah, it does.
And that is actually not supporting choice. It's actually supporting abortion.
Yeah.
And there are so many women who are vulnerable behind closed doors crying every day because they don't feel like they have a choice. And society is definitely not supporting a choice to keep a child.
Yeah. Well, and let's talk more about that word choice because it's so nuanced nowadays. People try to make it seem like it's black and white. My body, my choice.
Which I support when it comes to...
A statement you and I both agree with.
Yeah, I don't want the government telling me what goes in my body or what happens in my body.
Right. You don't get to tell me what to do with my body. There's nothing inherently wrong with that statement. The problem is that it does not apply to the abortion debate because when you are claiming my body, my choice, you are neglecting to acknowledge the fact that there is a second body that has entered the mix, and that is the body of the child. It is not a cluster of cells. Science has proven that life begins at conception. This is true across every species on this planet, including human beings. So when you're saying...
we have the conversation, do dead things grow?
No, they do not.
And so then we've just agreed life begins at conception because those cells are growing. So that's life. So then what kind of life is it? If you leave it uninterrupted, it becomes a human. So that's human life.
Exactly. And choice, again, coming back to choice. Why do women get to make the decision, but men don't have a choice themselves?
There's three people involved in the choice. There's the mom. There's the baby who has a hard time expressing choice when there's not very many people who have been born alive after abortion to let us know.
Like Gianna Jessen.
Right, who has been on our show to let us know what the abortion process is actually like as a human being, to be burned alive or dismembered or to go through those processes that are so inhumane. And then you have the father.
Yeah, the father, who is often ignored until it comes to his wallet. So the woman can decide, I will not have this child, and she
And
doesn't
maybe
have
not
to
even tell him.
not even tell him, but also
it's time to collect child support.
But also, there's stories out there about women who don't tell the father that she is pregnant, and then she has a child, and she goes, "By the way, you owe me child support." How? In what world is that fair? Like, so he doesn't have a choice in whether or not you have this child. And then he doesn't have a choice in whether or not he has to pay for the child, which he can go to jail if he doesn't.
That's right.
But it just doesn't make any sense to me. And
it's easy to make this abstract until you think about that could be one of your sons or one of your brothers.
Exactly.
Has a long-term relationship with a girlfriend.
Mm-hmm. Well, and when that happens, all of a sudden she's the bad guy. Well, but you defend her when it's not her.
Right. In an abstract policy debate, this is her choice. But then when it's, your family and he's on the line, he gets married and has another family, but that girlfriend is still entitled to 18 years of child support under our law.
It destroys men's lives when you do that.
That's right.
And they never have a say in it.
Actually supportive of choice when we think about the totality of the circumstances.
Exactly. It all falls on one party to make that choice, which isn't a choice. That's a unilateral decision.
Well, and again, when we think about what's actually happening, a unilateral decision in which she feels like she doesn't really often have a decision.
Course. Yeah, I'm not trying to make women out to be the bad guy. Just to be clear, I understand they go through so much with pregnancy. We do, like, as a whole, and it can be so terrifying and so stressful, especially when you don't have that support.
Right. And
I understand that completely. It angers me so much to see, because, I have 3 brothers and I have a boyfriend and I have male friends. And I've heard stories, including in college, from a guy I used to work with whose girlfriend terminated his baby, and he didn't even know she was pregnant until much later. So when you hear stories like that and you consider how it could apply to people in your life and what that could do to people in your life,
how did that affect him?
He still tears up when he talks about it. Honestly, like, it happened a couple years ago. He still gets choked up. And it's just like, it's so hard to see that impact on men and that they don't get to have a choice. And like, the entire industry is based in racism and eugenics. That started with Margaret Sanger. We know this. And she started her abortion cry by, at first, basing it in eugenics and white supremacy.
What is eugenics for people who don't know?
Eugenics is basically believing that one race or kind of human being is genetically superior to the other. And
so it's basically bringing around Darwin's theory by human action.
And you terminate every other species or race that isn't up to par with what you believe is superior. So she was a white supremacist eugenicist in Hitler's inner circle, and she started abortion in America originally in white supremacy. But her timing was off, because that was around the time that civil rights started to pick up and people started to see blacks as equal in America and treating them more and more like regular human beings. And so she had to pivot, and she changed it to the feminist argument, because that was also picking up. And now when you look around,
sexual freedom, right?
Sexual freedom, because she also started birth control and stuff. But when you look around nowadays, you see that Planned Parenthoods are in low income neighborhoods where ethnic women like me tend to end up. And that's on purpose. You don't see abortion clinics on the bougie sides of town. They're in the broke sides of town, because that's where the minorities tend to reside.
It's still in their documents to this day.
Oh, 100%.
That's part of the mission.
Mm-hmm. So they get money from it. It's based in racism. It's such a dirty, dirty industry that continues to destroy people's lives on all sides, the child's, the mothers, and the fathers.
Pivot to the hard question. Why is it okay for advocates of the life of a child to support the life of an unborn child, but also to support the death penalty?
Ooh, that's a great question. I have a lot of Catholic friends who are pro-life and anti-death penalty because they argue that the sanctity of life applies to all sides. But here's my thing, right? A child is innocent in every way. They have committed no acts against humanity. They have never harmed another person in their life. So as far as I'm concerned, they do have the right to continue living, and they have the right to be born. However, an inmate who has taken lives, destroyed lives, done horrible things, they have demonstrated that they will act against society and harm society as a whole when given the option. And so it's really just best to take justice and apply it there. The innocent should be allowed to live and have that right, and the guilty depending on the crime. I'm not saying petty theft deserves a death penalty, but like serial killers, like they've made their choice about how they want to spend their life, and it's not productive to society. It's harmful to society. And you see it in the Bible too. God has actually said that in Exodus, if a thief enters into the night and is killed, then the fault is not on the person that executed them. It's also biblical. So
there's this concept that justice at the hands of governing authorities in order to maintain a safe society where crimes against humanity are not allowed because they are punished. If you violate civil rights and human rights, then you have forfeited your own rights in society, and they have to be dealt with in a just way.
Yep.
And we have different ways of dealing with that, whether that's life in prison or death penalty.
Right.
Different states deal with it differently. Right. But your rights have been suspended. Your rights for freedom, your rights to life, etc.
Yeah.
And that hasn't been applied to an unborn child who has not done anything to deserve a penalty from the government.
Right. It is an unnecessary penalty being inflicted on an innocent life.
And instead, the government has a right, or not a right, an obligation to protect that citizen.
Right.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Well, good discussion. I appreciate you offering a perspective, especially of a young voter. This will be your
first presidential election.
First presidential election you're voting in. That's a really big deal.
Vote for Trump.
And another wonderful episode of Stand. You can become one of our standouts at
standshow.org.
I thought I'd throw that one to you at standshow.org. And we would love to have you join us, follow us, and be with us on social media. Today, you've been with Kelly and
Denali Tshibaka.
And we've been happy to have you on Stand. This is where courage is contagious, when we take a stand for freedom, truth, and government by the people. Join us next time on Stand, standshow.org. We'll see you then.